AITA for canceling my wedding after my fiancée invited my estranged father? I'm Alexander, 36, and until that night, I would have said Brooke was the one person who understood why I hadn't spoken to my father, Grant, in 8 years. Brooke and I had been together for 5 years and engaged for a little over a year. This wasn't some family detail I had dropped into conversation once and expected her to remember. She had seen the consequences of it. She had watched me ignore birthday messages that were passed along through other people. She had sat beside me when my younger sister, Tessa, got dragged into one of Grant's attempts to reach me. She had heard me say, more than once, that if I ever spoke to him again, it would happen because I chose to do it. That was why Brooke standing there at our rehearsal dinner, smiling nervously and calling his presence a surprise, didn't feel like a misunderstanding. It felt like the relationship I thought I was in had shifted beneath me without my knowing. To explain why I reacted the way I did, I need to explain Grant, but I don't want to pretend the story is as simple as my father was terrible, therefore everything I did was automatically right. I haven't spoken to him for 8 years because of a pattern, not because of one dramatic blow-up. My parents divorced when Tessa and I were young adults. They had been unhappy for a long time, and once the divorce became official, Grant seemed unable to accept that I didn't want a job in the aftermath. He wanted me to relay messages to my mother. He wanted me to tell Tessa why Mom was being unreasonable. He wanted updates about who had said what at holidays. If I refused, he treated that refusal like proof I was taking sides. At first, I tried to manage it. I thought if I answered carefully enough, I could keep the peace without actually becoming involved. That was probably my first mistake with him. Every careful answer taught him that if he pushed long enough, I would engage. One Thanksgiving, he called me before dinner and asked me to convince my mother not to bring someone she had started seeing because Grant didn't want to deal with that in front of family. It wasn't my house, my guest list, or my relationship. I told him that. He said, "You could help if you wanted to." I remember that phrase because he used versions of it constantly. If I didn't participate in whatever he believed would fix the family, it wasn't because I had a boundary. It was because I didn't care enough. Another time, he sent me a long email about something Tessa had said to him and asked me to tell her she was being unfair. I told him to talk to her directly. He replied, "You're her brother. She listens to you." She didn't, particularly, which would have been funny if the situation hadn't been so exhausting. The final break came 8 years ago, at Tessa's engagement celebration. She was 25 then, I was 28, and the night was supposed to be about her. Grant waited until there were enough relatives around that I couldn't leave without it being noticeable, then pulled me aside near the back of the restaurant. He started by asking whether I thought my mother would ever let the past go. Then he moved on to Tessa, then to an aunt he was feuding with. Within 5 minutes, he had turned my sister's engagement dinner into another strategy session about rebuilding the family according to his definition of rebuilding. I told him I wasn't doing it anymore. He said, "Doing what?" "Being your middleman." His expression changed immediately. "I'm asking you to care about your family." "I do care. That's why I'm not getting involved." He told me I was being dramatic. I told him I was going back to the table. That should have been the end of it. Instead, he followed me. Not quietly, either. He said in front of several relatives that I liked the family being divided because it made me feel important. He accused me of keeping people apart, so everyone would have to come through me. That accusation was so upside down that I didn't even know how to answer it at first. The entire problem was that I didn't want anyone coming through me. Tessa stood up and said, "Dad, not tonight." Grant told her to stay out of it, which was almost impressive considering it was her engagement celebration. I left. The next morning, I blocked his number. For a while, he kept trying through other routes. Emails from different addresses. Messages through relatives. A Christmas card sent to Tessa with a separate envelope for me. I didn't respond. Eventually, the attempts became less frequent. Not completely gone, but less frequent. Tessa maintained limited contact with him. I never asked her not to. She had her own relationship with Grant, and, importantly, she kept it separate from mine. If he asked her to pass something along, she might tell me he had tried, but she didn't pressure me to answer. By the time I met Brooke, the estrangement was already several years old. Early in our relationship, I mentioned Grant only in broad terms. I said we weren't in contact and hadn't been for a while. Brooke didn't push. That mattered to me. I had gotten used to people hearing, "I don't speak to my father," and treating it like an invitation to ask for the whole case file. Brooke didn't do that. She asked one question. Is that something you're okay talking about? I said, eventually. She said, okay. And we moved on. About a year later, when things between us had become serious, I told her more. Not every incident. Just enough for her to understand the pattern and the fact that my decision had not been impulsive. One of the memories I kept coming back to after the rehearsal dinner happened around our second year together. Tessa had forwarded me a birthday message from Grant because he had asked her to. She didn't editorialize it. She just sent it with, he asked me to pass this along. No pressure. I read it while Brooke and I were sitting on the couch. The message was not hostile. It was mostly sentimental. Grant said he missed me, hoped I was well, and wished we could stop wasting years. Brooke noticed my face. She didn't ask what he said. She didn't tell me he sounded sincere. She didn't say life was short. She asked, do you want to talk about it? I said no. She nodded, picked up the remote, and asked whether I still wanted to finish the show we had been watching. That small moment mattered more than she knew. Support, to me, looked exactly like that. She saw that I had a choice and didn't try to turn the choice into a problem she needed to solve. For most of our relationship, that was who Brooke was. She remembered things. She noticed when I was overwhelmed before I said anything. If I told her I needed an hour alone after a bad day, she gave me an hour without making it about her. She was the kind of person who could disagree with me without making me feel like disagreement meant disloyalty. Then wedding planning started making family roles more visible. Brooke's father had died when she was in her early 20s. I knew the basic story long before we got engaged. What I didn't fully understand until we were planning the wedding was how much regret she still carried around the months before he died. They had argued over something that, by her own description, wasn't huge. It had become a stubborn standoff. Neither of them called for several months. Then he died unexpectedly. Brooke had lived with their last conversation being an argument ever since. When we were talking about family photos one evening, she got quiet over the list of pictures the photographer wanted. Bride with mother. Bride with parents. Bride with father. She stared at that line longer than the others. I hate that he's not going to be there, she said. I reached across the table and took her hand. She said, and I hate that I wasted time being mad at him before he died. I knew enough not to tell her the situations were different. She was grieving. Grief doesn't need somebody standing over it with a whiteboard saying, technically, these facts are not comparable. I said, you didn't know what was going to happen. I know. That's almost worse. We talked about him for a while. She told me about a stupid fight they had over a family trip and how both of them kept expecting the other person to call first. She said she still sometimes imagined what she would say if she had one more hour with him. I listened. Looking back, I think that was when something started changing in the way she saw my relationship with Grant. Not all at once. She didn't go from respecting my boundary to secretly planning a reunion in one conversation. It was gradual enough that I kept finding innocent explanations for it. A few months later, while we were cleaning up after dinner, Brooke asked, do you think people can get so committed to being no contact that it becomes part of who they are? I thought she was talking about something she had seen online. Probably, I said. People can make anything part of their identity. So how would they know if they don't need it anymore? Need what? The distance. I put a plate into the dishwasher. I guess they decide that for themselves. She leaned against the counter. What if they're too angry to tell? I remember looking at her then. Is this about Grant? She hesitated for maybe half a second. Kind of. Just generally, too. I closed the dishwasher. Distance isn't always anger, Brooke. Sometimes it's just deciding you don't want the same relationship anymore. I just don't want you to find out too late that you were waiting for him to make the perfect apology. I'm not waiting for a perfect apology. She looked unconvinced. I said, if I ever want to talk to him, I'll be the one who chooses it. She nodded. I know. That should have been enough. For me, it was enough. I had said the thing clearly. I assumed the person I planned to marry would treat the answer as real. That assumption became one of my blind spots. As the wedding got closer, Grant's name appeared more often. Brooke asked Tessa once whether he had mellowed with age. I was there when she asked. Tessa shrugged and said, sometimes. Depends what you mean. Does he still try to get everyone involved in everything? Less with me, Tessa said. But I shut it down fast. Brooke asked, do you think he knows why Alex stopped talking to him? Tessa gave her a look. He knows what Alex told him. Whether he agrees with it is a different question. I remember thinking that was a good answer. I did not remember thinking it was a warning sign. Another time, Brooke asked me a strangely specific hypothetical while we were reviewing ceremony timing. If Grant ever gave you a real apology, would you rather hear it privately or with other people around so things stayed calm? I looked up from the schedule. Neither. I'm asking hypothetically, and I'm answering literally. She laughed a little, like I was being difficult on purpose. I just mean, would privacy make it easier or harder? I would rather not be put in that situation. She went back to the schedule. I noticed the question. I just didn't challenge it further. That was a pattern with me. I was slow to make irreversible decisions, but I was also slow to confront things I believed had already been settled. Once I had stated a boundary clearly, I tended to assume repeated discussion was just discussion. I thought Brooke was processing her own loss. I thought the wedding was making everyone sentimental. I thought a lot of things that were easier than asking why she suddenly needed so many details. Then, several months before the wedding, Brooke said Grant apparently knew we were engaged. We were driving home after meeting with one of the vendors. She said it casually, while looking out the passenger window. Your dad knows about the wedding, by the way. I glanced at her. How? I guess somebody showed him the engagement post. Did he contact you? There was a pause. Not a long one, just long enough that I noticed it. He sent me a message. What did he say? Congratulations, mostly. He asked how you were. Did you answer? She looked at me then. I said thank you. Anything else? Not really. I was driving, so I kept my eyes on the road. Brooke, I need you not to be a bridge between us. I'm not. I mean it. Don't carry messages. Don't arrange anything. Don't try to mediate. I know. If he wants something from me, that's his issue. If I ever want to contact him, I will. She said, I understand. Then she reached over and put her hand on my arm. At the rehearsal dinner, when I asked when she first started talking to Grant, I would think about that car ride and realize she had already been talking to him then. Her answer that day had not technically been a direct lie in every word. It had been worse in a different way. She had let me state a boundary while knowing she was already crossing it. The last week before the wedding was almost aggressively normal. That is one of the strangest things to remember now. There were small problems. One of the seating assignments needed to change. A relative had a travel delay. Brooke thought she had misplaced a piece of jewelry that turned out to be in the pocket of the bag she had already checked twice. We were tired, but mostly happy. One night, we were sitting on the floor with printed lists spread around us, and Brooke looked at me and said, I can't believe we're finally here. I said, I can. I've answered enough emails to prove it. She laughed. Then I said, no surprises after this week. I mean it. She smiled. One or two good ones. I thought she meant some wedding detail she was keeping from me. In a way, I guess she did. At the rehearsal dinner, I didn't understand any of this yet. I only knew that we had finished eating, people were lingering over coffee and dessert, and Brooke was acting like she was trying not to smile too early. She leaned toward me and said, I have one more wedding gift for you. I said, you already gave me a gift. This isn't that kind. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What kind is it? She looked toward a set of doors that led to a smaller private room beside ours. Your dad is here. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. Grant. She nodded. Here where? In the next room. He wanted to see you before tomorrow. I stared at her. Brooke's smile faded a little. She said, I know you're surprised. Did he come here on his own? No. Did you invite him? She took a breath. Yes. I remember looking down at my hand. The ring I was wearing was my engagement ring. Brooke and I had both worn rings after we got engaged, which had been her idea. It had never felt strange until that moment. Then it felt like the most obvious object in the room. I took it off. Brooke said, Alex. I set it on the table between us. Then we're not getting married tomorrow. Her face changed. Not because she suddenly understood why I was angry. I think she had expected anger. She had probably rehearsed anger. She had expected me to argue. Maybe refuse to go into the next room. Maybe accuse her of overstepping. Maybe, in the version she had built in her head, I would eventually see Grant, break down, forgive him, and thank her later. What she had not expected was a decision. Don't do that, she said quickly. Don't make this into something it's not. I almost laughed at that, but I didn't. What is it? It's me trying to give you a chance to talk to your father before something happens that you can't take back. You invited him to our wedding. To talk before the wedding. Privately. Without telling me. Because you would have said no. That was the first moment when I realized there was no misunderstanding to clear up. I said, then you already knew my answer. You just didn't like it. People near us had started noticing that something was wrong. Not the whole room. There was still regular conversation farther away. A few people close enough to hear us got quieter. Helen, Brooke's mother, stood up from her seat across the table. Alexander, she was trying to help. I looked at her. You knew? Helen's expression told me before she answered. Brooke has been worried about this for a long time. That wasn't exactly yes, but it was close enough. Tessa was sitting a few seats away. She looked from Helen to Brooke. Did he ask you to do this? She asked Brooke. Brooke said, it's complicated. Tessa's voice stayed flat. Did Alex ask you? No, but that's not the point. It kind of is. Brooke looked back at me. You're reacting before you've even seen him. The issue isn't whether I see him. How can you know that? Because the issue is you decided for me. Helen stepped closer. Sometimes someone has to make the first move. I said, not on my behalf. You'll understand when the shock wears off, Helen said. Brooke didn't do this to hurt you. I didn't say she did. Brooke's eyes were wet by then. I know you, Alex. I know you think you're done with him. But every time his name comes up, you change. You act like you don't care, but you do. Of course I care. That doesn't mean I want contact. You're still carrying it. That also doesn't mean I want contact. She shook her head. This is exactly what I mean. You reduce everything to the rule because the rule makes you feel safe. I looked at her for a few seconds. Then I asked, how long has he known where the wedding is? Brooke looked toward Helen. Tessa noticed. Brooke, I said. How long? A while. What does that mean? Alex, can we not do this here? You brought him here. I brought him to talk to you. I didn't bring him in front of everyone. Tessa asked, how long is a while? Brooke said, a few weeks. Before I could ask anything else, the side door opened. Grant walked in. He didn't stride in like he owned the place. He didn't look triumphant. He looked hesitant. Older, obviously. Thinner than I remembered. More gray in his hair. For 8 years, I had imagined what seeing him again might feel like under a dozen different circumstances. Anger. Panic. Maybe nothing. What I felt first was irritation that I was having the moment at all. Grant stopped a few feet inside the room. Alex. I didn't answer. He looked at Brooke, then back at me. I thought we were going to talk privately. Brooke stood up. Grant, maybe give us a minute. He looked at the ring on the table, then at my face. Something clicked for him. He said, you didn't know I was coming. It wasn't a question. I said no. His face tightened. I wouldn't have come if I knew that. Brooke said, that's not fair. You knew he was nervous about this. Grant turned toward her. Nervous? I asked, why did you think I wanted you here? Grant looked at me. Brooke said you did. I didn't move. He continued, slower now. She said you'd been asking about me. She said the wedding had you thinking about family. She said you wanted me here, but you couldn't make yourself send the invitation. I looked at Brooke. She started speaking immediately. I was trying to get both of you past the part where you were waiting for the other person to move first. Grant looked at me again. The room had become quiet around us, but not in some theatrical way. People were still there, chairs were scraping, someone across the room was whispering to another person who probably hadn't heard everything. Grant said, very quietly, he wasn't waiting for me, was he? Brooke didn't answer. That was the moment the shape of the problem changed. Until then, I had thought Brooke had invited someone I had explicitly excluded from my life. That was bad enough. Now I understood she had also told him I secretly wanted the exact thing I had told her I did not want. I asked, what did you tell him? I said. Brooke wiped at her face. I didn't quote you. That's not what I asked. I told him I thought you were less angry than you used to be. Did you tell him I wanted him at the wedding? She looked at me. Alex. Did you? I told him I thought you did. Grant said, you told me he did. Brooke turned to him. I said he couldn't admit it. No, Grant said. You said he wanted me there. Helen cut in. This is getting twisted. Brooke has been working on this for months because she loves you. Months. That word did more than anything else Helen had said. I turned back to Brooke. Months. Helen's expression changed slightly, like she realized she had said more than Brooke wanted said. I asked, when did you first reply to him? Brooke said, can we please talk about this somewhere else? When? Alex, not here. You planned a surprise reunion at our rehearsal dinner. I'm not the one who picked the location for this conversation. She looked down. I waited. One thing about me when I get very angry is that I get quieter, not louder. It isn't always a virtue. Sometimes it means I stay controlled long enough to avoid saying what I really mean. But that night it helped because I stopped arguing about motives and started asking questions. When did you first reply to him? About 4 months ago. That lined up almost exactly with the car ride. Before or after I told you not to mediate? Before. Did you keep talking to him after? She didn't answer. Brooke. Yes. How often? Not constantly. How often? Every couple of weeks. Sometimes more. Tessa said, you've been asking me about Dad for months. Brooke looked at her. I was trying to understand. You could have told me why. I knew you'd tell Alex. Yes, Tessa said. I would have. Helen said. Because then this never would have happened. Tessa looked at her. Exactly. Brooke started crying harder. Everyone is acting like I did something cruel. I was trying to fix something painful. I said, you didn't give me a chance to choose. You gave me a situation you thought I'd be too embarrassed to refuse. That's not true. You knew I'd say no if you asked. Because you always say no before you let yourself feel anything. There it was. Not malice. Not some secret plan to hurt me. Something more unsettling in a person I was about to marry. The belief that my answer stopped counting if she decided the answer came from the wrong emotion. I said, you were so afraid I'd regret my choice that you took the choice away. Brooke said, I didn't take anything away. You can still leave. Obviously. She gestured at the ring. I think she regretted saying it immediately. I said yes. I can. She covered her face for a second and then said, please don't decide our whole life in this room. That was the first thing she said that I agreed with. I looked around. People were close enough to hear. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry on Brooke's behalf. One of her relatives had moved near Helen. Tessa was beside me. Grant was standing off to the side like he wanted to disappear. I said, you're right. This isn't where we finish this. Brooke took a small step toward me. But there is no wedding tomorrow. Alex. I am not standing up tomorrow and making a lifelong commitment while I'm trying to figure out whether I trust the person I'm supposed to marry. Can we at least sleep on it? No. One night. The ceremony is in one night. We can send him away. Grant said, I'll go. No one answered him. He looked at me. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here. That was a strange thing to hear from Grant. For years, one of the reasons I had stayed away from him was that he rarely treated a boundary as final. Everything was negotiable if he had a good enough reason. Now, in the worst possible setting, he was the one person not trying to argue me into staying. I didn't thank him. I just nodded. Then I looked at Tessa. Can I stay with you tonight? Yeah. Brooke said, please don't leave like this. I picked up my phone and jacket. I left the ring on the table. I don't know how else to leave. Tessa came with me. Grant stepped out of the way. Brooke did not follow because I asked her not to. The next morning was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, I woke up on Tessa's couch around 5:30 after maybe 2 hours of sleep. For about 10 seconds, before my brain caught up, I thought I was waking up early because I had somewhere important to be. Then I saw my phone on the coffee table. I had more messages than I wanted to count. Some were practical. Are we still supposed to come? What happened? Do we need to cancel transportation? Some were kind. I'm here if you need anything. Some were not. You humiliated her. You could have just told your dad to leave. 5 years, and you throw it away over one mistake? One of Brooke's relatives wrote that whatever my history with Grant was, Brooke had acted out of love, and I had punished everyone for it. I didn't answer. Tessa came into the living room, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You sleep? Technically. She handed me one. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "You know people are going to call what you did nuclear." "I know. I'm not saying they're right." "I know." She sat in the chair across from me. "You could have postponed instead of canceling. It would have been canceled either way. You don't know that." "No, I don't." That was the first time I admitted it out loud. I didn't know. I knew I couldn't marry Brooke that morning. That part was clear. I did not know whether taking off the ring in the room had been the best possible version of that decision. I did not know whether, if I had walked outside with Brooke and talked privately for an hour, I would have phrased things differently. I did not know whether the shock had made me more absolute than I would have been on another day. But the ceremony was hours away. There was no version of me capable of standing there and meaning vows about trust while the basic facts of the night before were still changing every 10 minutes. I sent one message to the people who actually needed clarity. The wedding is canceled. A serious trust issue came up last night, and we are not going forward with the ceremony today. I'm not discussing private details in a group setting. I'm sorry for the disruption. That was all. I did not post anything. I did not send a long explanation to every relative. When individual people asked later, I gave a short version. Brooke arranged contact with my estranged father after I explicitly told her not to, and she told him I wanted that contact when I did not. I didn't tell them about Brooke's father. I didn't explain her grief. That wasn't mine to use as evidence against her. Around noon, Brooke texted me. "Can we talk today? Just us. No one else." I stared at the message for a long time. Tessa asked, "Do you want me to tell you not to?" "No." "Good, because I wasn't going to." I almost smiled. That was Tessa's way of reminding me that the choice was mine. I agreed to meet Brooke that afternoon. We met somewhere neutral and quiet. Not our place. Not Tessa's. Brooke looked like she had been awake all night. So did I, probably. For a minute, we sat across from each other without speaking. Then she said, "I'm sorry." I said, "For what?" Her eyes narrowed a little, not in anger exactly. "Do we have to do it like this?" "Yes." She looked down. "I'm sorry I lied to you." "What did you lie about?" "Talking to him." "And how much I was talking to him?" "And..." She took a breath. "I'm sorry I told him you wanted him there." "Did you believe that when you said it?" That question seemed to hurt more than the others. "Yes." I sat back. Brooke said, "I know that probably sounds insane now." "It doesn't sound insane. It sounds like you thought you knew what I wanted better than I did. I thought I knew what you were afraid to admit. That's not better." "I know." There was a pause. Then she said, "When my dad died, I promised myself I would never do that again." "Do what?" "Let pride waste time." I waited. She kept going. "I spent months not talking to him over something stupid. I kept thinking one of us would call. I thought I had time. Then I didn't. And I have replayed that for years." "I know." "When Grant contacted me, he didn't sound like the person you described." I said, "People rarely introduce themselves by listing their worst patterns." "I know that now." "You knew it then?" She shook her head. "No, I knew your side." Then I heard his side, and he sounded sorry. He said he missed you. He said he knew he had handled things badly. "Did he say he understood why I stopped speaking to him?" She paused. "Not exactly." "What did he say?" "That things got out of control. That everybody was angry. Everybody." Brooke closed her eyes briefly. "I can hear it now." "Hear what?" "How he spreads it out. How he makes it sound like something the whole family did instead of things he did." I didn't say anything. She rubbed her hands together. "The more we talked, the more I started thinking you were both stuck. He wanted to talk to you, and you kept bringing up old memories sometimes, and the wedding was making you emotional about family. I brought up old memories because you kept asking me questions." "I know." "No, Brooke. Do you?" She looked at me. "I would say something like, 'My dad used to make pancakes on Sundays,' because you asked what he was like when we were kids. And then you took that and told him I was softening." She said quietly, "Yes." "Did you ever consider that I meant what I said?" Her mouth tightened. "Yes." "And I thought fear was making the decision for you." I nodded. "That's the problem." She started crying again, but more quietly than the night before. I said, "You decided my answer wasn't real because you didn't agree with it." I thought I was saving you from regret. I know. I wasn't trying to control you. I know. That surprised her. I continued. I believe you. I believe you thought you were helping. That doesn't make me trust you more. She looked away. I can't undo it. No. I can show you the messages. I almost said no. Then I realized I wanted to know whether there was anything else. Okay. She handed me her phone voluntarily. There was no dramatic discovery. No secret second plot. The messages were basically what she had admitted. Grant first reached out with congratulations after learning about the engagement. Brooke replied. He asked how I was. She answered more than she told me she had. Over time, she began giving him pieces. Alex is less angry now. He talks about old memories sometimes. I think the wedding is making him think differently about family. At one point, Grant asked directly, "Does he know you're talking to me?" Brooke answered, "Not exactly. If I tell him now, he'll shut the door before he thinks about it." That line was difficult to read. Later, much closer to the wedding, Grant wrote, "I don't want to show up where I'm not wanted." Brooke replied, "You're wanted. He just can't make himself say it yet." I handed the phone back. She said, "I know." I asked, "When I told you in the car not to mediate, what did you think that meant?" She looked miserable. "Exactly what you meant." "Then why did you keep doing it?" "Because by then I thought if I stopped, I was helping both of you stay stuck." I let out a breath. So my boundary became evidence that I needed you to override it. She shook her head quickly. "No, I know how that sounds. It sounds accurate." She pressed her palms to her eyes for a second. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't either." That was true. I was angry, but anger was not the only thing there. I still loved her. That made everything harder. If Brooke had sat across from me and shown no remorse, the decision would have been simple. If she had told me I was crazy and she would do it again, I could have left feeling cleanly betrayed. Instead, she was a person I loved who had done something deeply manipulative while sincerely believing she was protecting me. She said, "I understand why you canceled today." I looked at her. "Do you?" "Yes." Then, after a pause, she added, "I still think doing it in front of everyone was." She stopped. "What? Harsh?" I nodded. "Maybe it was." She looked surprised again. I said, "I don't know what the perfect response would have been. I know I wasn't going to marry you today. Are we over?" I didn't answer immediately. That was the part people later misunderstood when they said I ended a 5-year relationship in 1 second. I canceled the wedding in 1 moment. I did not decide the entire relationship that night. "I don't know," I said. Brooke started crying harder. "I need time." "How much?" "I don't know." She nodded. Then she said, "I love you. I love you too." It was awful to say because it was true. The next day, Tessa told me Grant had asked her to pass along one request. Not a message, a request. He wanted one brief conversation, and he said if I refused, he would leave it alone. My first answer was no. Tessa said, "Okay." She didn't argue. About an hour later, I changed my mind. Not because I wanted reconciliation. I wanted information. I wanted to know whether he had helped plan the surprise, whether he had been pushing Brooke, whether there was another layer I still didn't understand. So I told Tessa I would give him 20 minutes somewhere public and quiet. When I arrived, Grant was already there. He stood when he saw me, then seemed to realize that might look too formal and sat back down. "Thanks for coming," he said. "This isn't a reunion." "I know." I sat across from him. For the first few seconds, I looked at his face and tried to connect it to the man I remembered. Same mannerisms in some ways. He still tapped one finger against the table when nervous. He still started sentences like he was about to give an explanation he had prepared. I said, "Did you ask Brooke to invite you?" "No." "Did you ask her to keep it secret?" "No." "Did you know I had told her not to mediate?" His face changed. "No." "She told you I wanted you there?" "Yes." "Why did you believe her?" Grant looked down. "Because I wanted to." That answer was more honest than I expected. He continued. "When she first replied, I thought maybe you knew. Later she said you didn't know yet, but that you were coming around. She said if I contacted you directly, it would ruin the chance." I remembered the message I had just read. Did that not seem strange to you? It did. But you went along with it. Yes. Why? He looked at me. Because I wanted her version to be true. I waited. He said, I should have known better than to come without hearing it from you. Yes. I thought maybe you were embarrassed to call after this long. That's what she told you. Yes. Did you ever think I just didn't want contact? He was quiet. Yes. And I didn't want that to be the answer. I almost laughed, because for a second he sounded exactly like Brooke. Different reasons, same outcome. My answer was inconvenient, so they each found a way to reinterpret it. Grant said, I'm sorry I came. I nodded. Then he started, and about before, I know I made mistakes with your mother and with Tessa, and I was under a lot of. I held up a hand. No. He stopped. I came to find out what happened with Brooke. I'm not doing 8 years of history right now. His mouth tightened. Old Grant would have argued about fairness. Old Grant would have said I had misunderstood him. This time he nodded. Okay. That didn't erase anything. It did not prove he had transformed. One respectful reaction after 8 years of boundary problems is not a redemption arc. But I noticed it. He said, Can I ask one thing? You can ask. Did I ruin your wedding? No. He looked confused. I said, Your presence exposed a problem. That's not the same thing. He looked down. After a moment, he said, I won't contact you again. I said, Good. He flinched slightly. I didn't enjoy that. But I meant it. Then I got up and left. The social fallout was messy in the ordinary way these things are messy. There was no giant family war. No one disowned anyone. Nobody publicly posted private messages. People just started having opinions. Some of Brooke's relatives thought I had used her mistake as an excuse to escape commitment. One told a mutual friend that a man who really wanted to get married would have found a way to postpone, not blow it up. Some of my extended relatives thought Brooke had crossed a line, but still believed canceling the ceremony immediately was too extreme. A few people said nothing, which I appreciated more than they knew. Helen did not contact me directly after the first week, but I heard through Brooke that she believed I was being cruel by not immediately reconsidering. Her position was consistent, at least. She believed estrangement was usually pride. She believed family reconciliation was inherently good. She believed someone sometimes had to force the first conversation because stubborn people would never create it themselves. That worldview made sense to her. It was also exactly why I no longer wanted her involved in my life. Tessa supported me, but she didn't tell me every decision I made was perfect. A few days after the canceled wedding, she said, I think Brooke was completely wrong. Okay. I also think taking off the ring in the room was nuclear. You already said that. I'm saying it again because you're acting like those two things can't both be true. I looked at her. She shrugged. You can be justified in not marrying her and still wonder whether you handled one part badly. I hated that she was right. I do wonder. Good. That's all I get. Do you want a speech? No. Then good. She was also the person who explained something to me about Grant that I hadn't considered. He really thought you invited him, she said. I know. No. I mean, he was nervous all day because he thought you wanted to talk, and he was scared he'd mess it up. That doesn't make me feel better. It's not supposed to. I'm just telling you he wasn't planning an ambush with Brooke. I know. He was used. So was I. Yes. That was the strange part. Grant was still responsible for the history that made me cut contact. He was still responsible for choosing to believe a convenient story instead of verifying it. But in the central event that blew up my wedding, he was not the person who fabricated my consent. Brooke was. That distinction mattered even though I didn't particularly want it to. About a week after the cancellation, Brooke called me and said she had started correcting people. What do you mean? My family. Friends. Anyone I told before that you were probably going to be glad I did it. I didn't realize she had said that to people. She heard the silence. I didn't tell everyone. Mostly my mom. A couple people who knew I was planning something. What are you telling them now? That you never asked for it. That you weren't secretly waiting for him. That I made that up because I believed it. I sat with that. Okay. I know that doesn't fix anything. No. I just didn't want people thinking you were pretending afterward. That correction mattered. It did not restore trust, but it mattered. The problem with a real apology is that it makes leaving harder. If Brooke had spent the next month insisting she had been right, I would have known what to do. Instead, she began taking responsibility in ways that sounded less and less like an attempt to win me back. At first, her apologies still had explanations attached. I'm sorry, but I was scared you'd regret it. I'm sorry, but I really believed you wanted him there. I'm sorry, but I thought you were protecting yourself from something you actually wanted. But made me feel like we were still in the same argument. Then, slowly, that changed. Several weeks after the wedding, Brooke asked if we could talk again. I agreed. We met in a park and walked because sitting across from each other had started to feel like an interview. She looked tired, but steadier. She said, I'm not asking you to reschedule anything. Okay. I'm not even asking you to put the ring back on. I waited. I want to ask if there's a version where we start over slowly. What does that mean? I don't know exactly. Counseling, maybe. Time apart. No wedding date. Just seeing if trust can come back. I had thought about the same thing. More than once. I missed her constantly. I missed stupid things. The way she left half a glass of water on the nightstand every night. The way she always remembered which groceries we were almost out of without writing them down. The way she would text me a picture of some ridiculous dog she saw while walking because she knew it would make me laugh. I missed the version of my life where none of this had happened. Brooke said, I've been trying to understand why I couldn't just hear you. I said nothing. She continued. I made your boundary into a problem to solve. That was the first time she had described it that way. She said, and when you didn't give me the answer I wanted, I decided the answer wasn't really yours. I decided it was fear. Then I built a whole situation around making it harder for you to say no. I looked at her. She did not say but. She did not mention her father. She did not mention Grant's regret. She said, that was wrong. I believed her. That made the decision much harder. She asked, do you think you could ever trust me again? I said, I don't know. It was the truth. For a couple of weeks after that, I seriously considered trying. Not marrying her. Not yet. Trying. I looked up counseling options, then closed the tab. I wrote down things I would need to feel safe again, then hated that I had used the word safe about a relationship that had never been physically dangerous. But emotional safety was the right phrase. Before the rehearsal dinner, if Brooke disagreed with me, I assumed she would tell me. Afterward, every disagreement had another possible layer. Would she accept my answer? Would she decide I didn't mean it? Would she involve someone else? Would she wait until I was cornered by circumstances and then tell herself she was helping me be brave? That is an exhausting way to think about someone you love. One evening, Brooke and I spoke on the phone. It was a normal conversation at first. We talked about a mutual friend, something stupid on television. For 10 minutes, I almost forgot. Then she said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to know I'm going to accept the answer. That sentence broke my heart a little, because it was exactly what I had needed from her before the wedding. She asked whether I wanted her to stop contacting me unless I initiated. I said yes. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, okay. No argument. No interpretation. No attempt to turn the no into a fear response. Just okay. Ironically, that was one of the moments that convinced me the relationship had to end. Not because she did anything wrong in that call. Because I felt relief when she respected a basic answer. Relief should not have felt like a new achievement after 5 years together. A few days later, I asked to meet her one last time. I had spent weeks telling myself I could choose to rebuild. That was true. I could. The question was whether I actually wanted the relationship I would be rebuilding. Brooke arrived knowing, I think. She looked at me and said, you're ending it. I said yes. She nodded once. No dramatic scene. No begging. I said, I believe you're sorry. I am. I believe you understand now. I do. I still can't restart the engagement. Her eyes filled, but she kept looking at me. Because of what I did. Because of what it changed. She waited. I said, I'm watching you now. Every disagreement, every weird question, I wonder if there's something happening behind it. I don't know how to be in this relationship without monitoring it. We could work on that. I know. Then why not try? I didn't answer right away, because that was the real moral conflict for me. A 5-year relationship had value. Love had value. Remorse had value. People can change. Trust can sometimes be rebuilt. I knew all of that. I also knew I was not obligated to stay simply because rebuilding might be possible. Finally, I said, I can understand why you did it, and still decide I can't live with what you did. Brooke looked down. After a while, she said, I wish I had just listened. So do I. She gave a short, broken laugh. I really thought one day you'd thank me. I know. That's the worst part. I didn't know what to say to that. We talked for another half hour about practical things. Nothing dramatic. We had shared parts of our lives for years, and untangling them was ordinary and painful. At the end, Brooke said, I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I don't hate you. I know. I mean it. She nodded. I know. Then we left separately. The weeks after that were not empowering. I didn't wake up every morning proud that I had defended my boundary. Mostly I missed her. There were places I stopped going for a while because I associated them with us. Mutual friends became complicated. Some people kept inviting both of us and letting us figure it out. Others quietly chose one side because it was easier. A few invitations stopped coming entirely. I understood. No one wants to host dinner and spend the whole night wondering whether the canceled wedding couple can sit across from each other. Tessa stayed close. She was careful around anything involving Grant. More careful than before. If he called her, she didn't tell me unless there was a reason I needed to know. I noticed that too. For the first time in years, Grant stopped trying to reach me through anyone. No birthday message. No, just tell him, I said. No requests through relatives. Silence. About a month after Brooke and I officially ended the engagement, Tessa came by with a sealed envelope. She held it out, but didn't move closer. Before you say anything, I haven't opened it. I looked at the envelope. My name was written on the front in Grant's handwriting. He mailed it to me, she said. There was a note outside saying not to give it to you unless I thought you'd want the choice. I looked at her. What do you think? I think it's your choice. That answer almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because after everything, those words had become heavier than they should have been. I said, did he ask you to convince me to read it? No. Did he ask for an answer? No. I almost told her to take it away. For 8 years, my answer had been no. And the whole disaster with Brooke had started because someone decided no was not really my answer. So I stood there looking at the envelope and tried to separate two things that had been tangled together for too long. Not wanting to be forced into contact was not the same as never wanting contact under any circumstances. Refusing a reunion arranged behind my back did not mean I had to refuse every future choice just to prove I had been right. I took the envelope. Tessa didn't smile or say good. She just said, okay. I opened it later that night. The letter was short. Grant wrote that he was sorry he had come to the rehearsal dinner under false assumptions. He said he should have verified what I wanted instead of believing what he wanted to believe. He apologized for the history that had made me stop speaking to him in the first place. Not perfectly. There were still sentences I could have argued with. There were places where I could see the old instinct to explain himself. But he also wrote one thing clearly. He would not contact me again unless I initiated it. No deadline. No request. No, life is short. No message asking me to be the bigger person. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and put it back in the envelope. I did not answer. I also did not throw it away. Months earlier, I had told Brooke, if I ever want to talk to him, I'll be the one who chooses it. At the rehearsal dinner, that choice had been taken out of my hands by someone who loved me and believed love gave her permission to interpret my no as something else. Now the possibility of contact was sitting in an envelope on my table. Nobody had arranged a meeting. Nobody was waiting in the next room. Nobody had told Grant I secretly wanted a different answer. I could read the letter. I could put it away. I could respond someday. I could never respond at all. For now, I put it in a drawer and went to bed. That was the first version of the situation that actually felt like mine. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.